Right, shalom, family, shalom, Shabbat. Hey, today we really gonna get off, into this thing, talking about heritage or religion. I really have to explain this because it just seems like no matter how much you talk about it, people think they can make this stuff be what they want it to be. Again, we're going to deal with the Bible, talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Shem. Talking about our Lord, Yahshua, Hamashiach. They also call him Jesus Christ. But we're going to talk about it from the standpoint of the heritage. We're not going to deal with it from the standpoint of the religion. Y'all, these two things, are different. So, real quick, I'm just going to tell you a story. The other day I was out, and about, and I was in a store, picking up some groceries, and a guy walked up to me and he said, hey, I want to know if I could talk to you, about coming to our church, for a study. And I looked at him and I said, well, I said, really, man, you don't want me at your church. I said it would just be too much contention, for me to be at your church. And he had this little puzzled look, on his face. And he was like, contention? No, why would there be any contention? I said, well, first of all, you're dealing with the Bible from the standpoint of religion. I said, I'm dealing with it from the standpoint of a heritage. I said, these two concepts are totally different, And, he still had this puzzled look, on his face. And he sought to just like override, what I was saying, like, oh, he don't know, what he's talking about, So he keeps, pushing to, advocate for me to come to, a Bible study. And I'm like, well, look, let me just explain it to you, like this. If you want me to come speak, at your venue, I'll come speak, at your venue, or we could set up a panel and we could have, a discussion, about these things, because I already know it's different. And then one of his partners came, up, within the store, like they were just meeting, or, maybe it's a thing where they in these stores now and they scouting, they trying to find people. And I'm looking, I'm like, what? Okay, do I look like a mark, or something? Is this a game? And they start laughing, But then now both of them are talking to me, and they're into the book, and then they get to telling me about Israel and how the people over there in Israel, those are the real people. And right then I'm like, see, this is why I can't talk to y'all. They stopped, they paused. I said, see, because y'all dealing still with this from the standpoint of religion. And then they went to talking about, oh, we're the Gentiles. And so I said, well, who told you that? Now mind you, I'm not where I am in this grocery store, because I know once I start opening up, man, I might be there 4 hours, for something that I was really in the grocery store to, deal 30 minutes, at most. So it went from that, to them talking about what they are the Gentiles, into, they're spiritual Jews. And that's when I said, okay, I'm done. And from spiritual Jews and went to spiritual Israel, I said, see, I'm done. I said, that's what I'm talking about. You guys are dealing with religion. I said, according to the heritage, there's no such thing, as a spiritual Jew or spiritual, Israel. I said, we're not, the Gentiles. I said, all of these are things that come from the religion. These are things that, they taught us based on their institutions, right? So I felt today I just need to put a little more emphasis on it and probably pull out some definitions so we can kind of see and or distinguish, what's really happening here, what's going on, and why is it so hard for people to understand that a religion is one thing and a heritage is a totally separate thing, especially when we're talking about, the Bible. Okay? So let me just go and get into it. Oh, and by the way, after that, because I did exchange my number, with the guy and, said, hey, if you want to discuss this, further, we can talk. But he kept trying to push the whole religion thing. I shut that down and said, look, just send me an invite to come speak, at your place, or let's set up a panel. So I hadn't heard anything from him, after that. He kind of went quiet. He got dark. But maybe he'll, reach back later, and we will be able to set up a panel. That's probably more along the lines of what they would want to do, if anything. But, yeah, so let me just jump off into this thing, religion, talking about heritage and or religion. Okay, so I went to Britannica. And in the Britannica, the first thing I wanted to pull up was religion. So it says the belief in a God or group of gods, right? Now, also in the Britannica, it has in brackets a word that says non-count. And, non-count, is basically, saying this is something, that you really can't put a number, on. And what that made me think of was with religion, you have 30 some odd thousand different denominations, and divisions. It's like it can just keep going and growing, like, but that is just with Christianity. When you pull religion as a whole, I mean, it supersedes the concept of 35 or 30,000, so non-count is like you can't count it, when it comes to religion, right? So it says the belief in a God or group of gods. Number two, it says an organized system of beliefs, ceremonies, and rules used to worship a God. And mind you, this is lowercase g, when they talk about gods and gods, these are lowercase g's that it's preferencing, right? To worship a God or a group of gods. So that's, what a religion is all about. So you look at organized system of beliefs. When you come to Christianity, it's an organized system of beliefs. When you talk about Constantine, as people love to bring up the Council of Nicaea, all of that is specifically tied to the religion. They created a system of beliefs. They created this system of beliefs, right, from what we identify as our heritage, but they recognize they're not the people. So yeah, they created this religion based on a system of beliefs. They have ceremonies, right? And what they did with Christianity, they tied in a number of the pagan customs and traditions. That's your religion. That's what we have today, the rules and the standards that they have to worship a God. Their God, interestingly enough, their God is named Jesus. He's a white boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, right? And then they tried to take the picture down and say, oh, don't look at the picture, more. Oh, don't, his color, don't matter. But everybody around the world understands and knows with Christianity, there's a God named Jesus. And, he's, if you were to identify him, there's a statue, of him within all of your Catholic churches. There's a statue of him, standing over Brazil, the stone statue. These, are their idols. This is their God. But when it comes to the heritage, that Jesus and the Jesus that's in the book, they're two different Jesus, right? So this is why the religion, the belief in a God, and why you have to now distinguish the difference between the Jesus that's in the religion and the Jesus that's in the Bible that's associated to the heritage. Okay? All right, so now let's look at heritage. All right, the definition for heritage. It says, in brackets, it says count, right? Because you remember with religion, it said non-count. Like, it can go on and on and on, like the sands, like the stars. It's like you can't count it, right? It can go on and on, right? But with heritage, excuse me, with heritage, in brackets, it says count. So it's like you can identify, off the jump, whether it's 1, 2, it's a specific thing. But then with heritage, it opens up and it says the traditions, achievements, beliefs, then it says etc., that are part of the history of a group or nation. Then it says usually it's singular. I'm going to address that part right there. The usually it's singular. I'm going to address that part. But let's come back to the heritage is tied to traditions. And then, mind you, the heritage, it's a count. So it's something that you can look at and say, oh, this is specific to this one group. Right? That's the count. As to where a non-count is like it's so many, it's so vast that you can't really associate it, from the particular standpoint, right? So he says the tradition, right? The achievements, the beliefs that are part of the history. And this is what I'm saying. When you're reading the Bible from the standpoint of the heritage, it's about the history of the people. That's the heritage of the people. That's the difference, right there. It says or group or nation. Now, the singular part, usually singular, right? Because you've heard me say, when it comes to a heritage, you're a part of that heritage, and nobody can, like, come and tie themselves, to it and be like, oh, now, we're also, a part of this heritage. That's more identified with how religions, work. But here it says usually singular, right? So meaning a heritage is normally tied to a specific group, of people or, a nation. So I'm not familiar, with any two groups of people that have come together and created, a heritage. But this lets me know that, oh, it's possible. I just don't have any record, for it. So this, weirdly enough, and I'm trying to get in front of this before it even happens, because this, weirdly enough, opens the door to where Christianity will come and jump in, and they'll say, see, usually, no different than how when we talk about Gentiles, y'all, if y'all remember, when we were talking about Gentiles, and it said usually a non-Israelite people. And we focused on the point of saying usually it's a non-Israelite people, but in this case where the book was talking about Gentiles, it was, an Israelite people. So coming back, looking at heritage, where it says usually singular, and I'm saying I'm trying to get in front of it because the Christian church or Christianity will try to use that and say, oh, see, usually, so this is where we have the spiritual Jews and the spiritual Israel, and that's how we get to be a part of the heritage. You can't make it up, like that. That's not what this is talking about, because then you'd have to still go into the book and find where, based on the history and or this nation of people, that they agreed to have a spiritual Israel or spiritual Jews, and you all, that's not there. It doesn't exist. But with the religion, they want to be spiritual Jews. They want to be spiritual Israel. They could be whatever they want to make up, because that's what religion is. It's a made-up system of beliefs that men have come together and created. That's why I'm telling you, religion based on men, y'all, this is of the devil. It's not of the Creator. It's not of God, right? God gave his people a heritage. That's what we're going to talk about, today. As, we're here, we're distinguishing the difference between the religion and the heritage. So hopefully with those two definitions, it has given you enough to kind of see why I spend so much time, separating and or looking at why we say heritage and why we're standing away from, the concept of the religion, and why the world is tied up into religions. That's what they were born into, or that's what we were born into, and we're now separating ourselves from it, as God said, come out of her, my people. But the question is, are you, his people, right? So let's get off into our precepts, for today, as we look to deal with this heritage that God gave his people, looking at this history. And I'm telling you, when you look at the Bible from the standpoint of the heritage, you really start to associate the parallels between who today we call black people, African American, the struggles that we go through, and how it's so identical to the struggles that the people, in this book, are going through. We are that same people, right? Now, we're of the 12 tribes, so people don't get it twisted. I'm not saying, that, as black people, we are the Jews and, like we're everything. No, we're a part, of this heritage that we have 12 tribes, in total. But we're key with respect to these 12 tribes, or we're key within this heritage because we are called to lead the dynamic. We're going to be in front of it. We're the ones that's going to provide, the standard of the law. We're right there. So we have a chief role that we're going to play, in this thing. All right? So y'all, just hold on one second. Hold on. So, as I was saying, we're going to have a chief role. And this is why I spend a lot of time talking to you, Judah, those who call themselves black, African American, because this is our heritage. This is our history. This is our name. This is all the things that were stripped from us, when we or our ancestors were brought over here, on those cargo ships. And, even for those, of our people that made it to this land, a time before, and when the Europeans came, they were already here. But nevertheless, we're dealing with 12 tribes. We're dealing with the kingdom of Israel. This is our lost history. These are our ancestors. We're not African. We're not from the seed of Ham. We're not Egyptian. We're not a part, of that legacy, right? Our ancestors are the likes of David, Solomon, Joshua, the one they call Jesus, Samuel, Samson. These are our ancestors. In the book called the Bible, when we look at it from the standpoint of the heritage, it has a stronger sense to us being able to identify the lost history, that we've been searching, so hard for, right? So again, this is why we're looking at this, from the standpoint of the heritage, being able to identify with the people in the book from the standpoint of the history, what they went through, what God said, they're going to go through, and how it's going to end. This is how we understand, how to function and or operate. So we're going to jump off, and we're going to start out with John 15, and number 1, it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. He says, every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he take away. So this looks at, the point to where, for those of us that are of this heritage, if you do not want to participate in the heritage and, be a part of, this history, or take hold to your name, then God is going to destroy you, right? You're going to perish right along, with the heathen. You're going to receive the reward of the heathen. He says, and every branch that bears fruit, he purge it. Meaning, like for those of us that realize, we're Israelites. This is our heritage. This is what's been missing in our life. And we realize we've lived a screwed up life, right? Based on following the customs and traditions, like our mind has been ruined, by the philosophies and the traditions, of this world and this place called America, right? But when we identify, we are the people, of this book, then he says he'll purge, or he will clean or cleanse us, right? And he'll put us back in our rightful state, in our rightful place. He says, in every branch that bears fruit, he purge it, that it may bring forth more fruit, right? Bringing forth more fruit is where you're now, once you realize this, you start, educating and or edifying those that are around you, be it, your children, or your family, or those that you recognize bear witness, their spirit bear witness, okay? He says, now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken to you, okay? So that's what I was saying as far as the purging. You don't have to be dunked in water. Because you got some folks that still run around saying, you need to be baptized. Geno Jennings, that's his famous line right there. And don't get it wrong. Ain't nothing wrong, with being dunked in water. It's a symbolic thing, right now. But here he says, now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. So it's the word that now, will cleanse us. Or that's the baptism that we go through. As he says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul, right? He said, now you are clean through the word which I've spoken to you. Once we realize this is our heritage, right? We are the people of this book, and we start looking, at how we're supposed to function according to how the law is written from the moral standpoint, from the civil standpoint, from the dietary standpoint, just to name a few, then it will purge, our soul, even our bodies, become, purged, although, the flesh will not inherit the kingdom, but in, this time dispensation, in this world, there will be a dramatic shift, within our being, right? He says, now you are clean through the word which I have spoken, to you. So getting tapped into the, as Isaiah 8:20, says, it says, to the law and to the testimony, right? If you're not understanding of these things, he said, there's no light, in you. That's the emphasis that we need to be, we need to put emphasis on the law and the testimony. And you always hear me saying, in the religion, looking at Christianity, those are the things they shy away from because they have a totally different set of beliefs. That's why, it's a doctrine of devils, seducing spirits, as the book warns and or tells us. But we've not been told or shown to look at the difference between what a religion is and like analyzing it and what this heritage is and how it's specific, to a particular group of people. And everybody just can't come and jump in and join on, right? We are a special people to the Lord our God. And once we embrace that, our environment around us, everything changed. Once we start dealing with the words that are written, the oracles of God, it changes, it will change our life. Our surroundings, will change. As he said, now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken, unto you. And I told you before, a number of people, this stuff, it seems hard. It seems hard to believe. Okay, but for those that know it to be true, you tap in. John 3:30. He says, he must increase, but I must decrease. Because I just said baptism, right? You don't have to go down in water. And, I spoke about, Geno Jennings, how he puts a lot of emphasis, on that. And, with Christ, we don't have to deal with being baptized, in water. He makes it clear, that the word is going to cleanse us. But John, in 3:30, who was dealing with the water baptism, he's explaining that the water baptism has to fall back. And what Christ is doing, must, move forward. That's the way now, that you must look at it. He says, he must increase, but I must decrease. He that come from above is above all, right? He that is of the earth is earthly, okay? And speak of the earth, but he that come from heaven, is above all. Y'all, this is really, it's deep if you like deep stuff, okay? Because you've been here when we talked about the celestial bodies and being changed, in a twinkling, of an eye, the corruptible, and the uncorruptible, immortality, and the sting of death being swallowed up. So here, he says, he that come from above is above all, right? As Yahshua said, like, when I return, I'm not going to meet you, as no man, right? He that is of the earth is earthly. So it's talking about this flesh. I mean, that's just your bound and the water, the water baptism, there are limits, to that. And, and speak of the earth, right? That's the limitation, of your discussion. He says, but he that come from heaven is above all. So when you realize what the celestial, body is about, your conversation is not so much looking at the elements of this earth being, the water and the things that are tied, to this realm. You now can understand how when Christ say, you're going to be cleaned, through the word which I have spoken. It's like, yeah, That's not tied to the water and the air. It's not tied to the things of the earth. But when you understand immortality and you have that celestial body and you're in that realm, it's a totally different thing. So, but like I said, that's a deep concept when you're reading, John 31, there. Number 32, it says, and what he have seen and heard, that he testified, right? And no man received his testimony. So, here we are. We're talking about this law and this testimony, and like Isaiah said, who's going to believe our report? Like, no one believes. Let me say, very few people, believe this report that we are the children of Israel, that we're Israelites. They're like, I ain't no Israelite. I'm an American. I'm black. I'm African American. I'm a Negro. I mean, they don't hear, this report. They don't receive this testimony that, this is our heritage and this is the prophecy that says we were going to be in this position, and if we pivot and come back to our God, that's how we can get out of this oppression and be put back on top to rule the earth. And they look at you all side-eye. Who gonna rule the earth? These niggas over here? Man, I ain't fooling with you, man. Y'all crazy. Y'all better get you some money. I'm going to go over here and get me some money, so we're going to go out tonight. That's what he said. When you're of the earth, you deal with earthly things, right? He says, number 33, he that have received his testimony have set to his seal that God is true. So now you have those that reject the testimony, and then you have those that stand on the testimony, identifying that God is true based on the prophecy, based on how he said he was going to deal with his people. And you look and see, when you follow the prophecy and how it aligns so tightly with what has transpired, to us as black folks, here in America, and we're still, under oppression, and we need to be delivered, from this oppression, and no man can deliver us, but God said they're not going to talk about how he pulled the people up out of Egypt, but he's going to talk about how he brought them out of the land of the north. And that's going to be relative to us in America because we're still in the land of our captivity, y'all. And if you're tapped into this prophecy, you understand these things to be true. As he said in 33, he that have received his testimony have set to his seal that God is true. For he whom God have sent speak the words of God. As he said, when you deal with the preacher, on his lips or in his mouth should be knowledge. We have to deal with the words of God, right? For God give not, the Spirit by measure, unto him. The Father loved the Son and have given all things into his hand. So this is, again, where people have a hard time, understanding that, the Father is the head, the Son, is beneath the Father. The Son is our head, or Christ, is our head. But yet, they all think they can circumvent the Son and deal directly with the Father. But the Father have put all things into the hand. It's like, as you've heard me say before, he's delegated, that authority and or the responsibilities to the Son. So when you talk about the Creator, y'all, you got to know who you're talking about. In this instance, the Creator is the Son, and that's according to our heritage. right? In the religion, it's something totally different, okay, on a number of levels, okay? Um, Ephesians 5 and 26. He says that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water, by the word. So I'm just emphasizing, even more that, as John said, I must decrease that he must increase. And, it's the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. It's like these words, once we come back to our heritage and, our eyes are open, it's like these words will cleanse us. These words, will make us available to where we can be accepted, by our Lord. Not the earthly things, as he say, being dumped, down into the water. Okay? And again, it's a symbolic thing. And if that's what you wanted to do or you felt like you need to do it, okay. No big deal. Right? But those things, have decreased and these things, are increasing. Okay? Right? He said that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having a spot, or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. Again, once we understand the gravity of this word, that's the thing that's going to convert our soul. Not being dunked in water. Okay? And we will be purged. We will be cleansed. We will be acceptable. But right now, we're in a filthy state. We're dealing, within a filthy world. That's why it has to come to an end. And the world of righteousness has to begin. And it's so important for us to receive it and understand it from the standpoint of the heritage, because we're at the forefront of it. Again, that's why in America they spend so much time and emphasis. They spend billions of dollars on preventing what you call black people and African Americans from uniting. Because once we unite, we realize, that we don't need them. But if we're uniting and we're not uniting under the umbrella of the heritage, we're not going to be successful. And that's just the way, that's going to roll. Okay? Matthew 5 and 48. It says, be ye therefore perfect, okay? Even as your Father which is in heaven, is perfect. So the only way we can be perfect, although within Christianity, within the religion they tell you can't be perfect, within our heritage we can be perfect. And by dealing with this word, and when it cleanses us, that's the thing that will make us, perfect. Furthermore, as I dealt, in management, as I dealt in management, folks used to always talk about, not setting somebody up, for failure, right? So in this scenario, where Christ says, be ye perfect, this is what Christ said. He said, be perfect, right? In the religion, they say you can't be perfect, and it made me ask, so will Christ set us up for failure, right? Would he tell us to be perfect, but yet we can't be perfect? Because in the religion, they say nobody can be perfect. Just forget it. They say forget about it. It can't be done. You can't do it. So don't waste your time. So it's like, will Christ set us up for failure right here, you all? No, he would not. And this is something else that exposes, the lies within the religion and why the heritage is something totally separate and or different. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven, is perfect. Philippians 3 and 2, he says, beware of dogs, right? Beware of evil workers. Beware of the concision. He says, for we are the circumcision, which worship God in the Spirit. We need to understand what worshiping God in the Spirit is all about, right? Worshiping God in the Spirit and rejoice in Christ Jesus. Now, we're speaking the English language. Y'all, we're not going to get caught up on semantics, right? I just said, and rejoice in Christ Jesus. There's some people, they're offended, by that, but we speak the English language. And in this word, the Creator made certain to leave us a note that says, I put my word above all my name. So that means for us to be focused on how to worship God in spirit before we get caught up on, oh, he just said Jesus Christ and he didn't say Yahshua. So, yes, we made a distinguishable difference, in the beginning that within religion they do have a God, named Jesus. But in this heritage and from the point that we're speaking, we're not talking about that. So let's not mix, the apples with the oranges. Let's just stay consistent with the heritage. Let's speak this language, of English that we speak, and let's identify and know who we're talking about and what we're talking about right here. Right? And rejoice in Jesus Christ and have no confidence in the flesh. No confidence in the flesh. No confidence in the religion. No confidence in the worldly things. We must know how to worship God in the Spirit. We're going to get to it. Right? John 6:63. He says, it is the Spirit that quickens. The flesh profit nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. So this flesh is going to fall, right? Our immortality is going to be centered around our soul. And he told us that these words, were going to purify our soul. So if we want to worship God in spirit based on our heritage, we have to do it as it pertains to the oracles of God. Okay? He says, the flesh profited nothing. He said, the words that I speak unto you, he says, they are spirit and they are life. These words are what's going to qualify us for immortality. We have to distinguish the difference between the earthly things, and those things, that are of our Creator, centered around, everlasting life. Okay. Romans 8:13. He says, for if ye live after the flesh, ye shall die. If you're going to live your life according to the standards of the world, then you're going to die. Not only are you going to, expire as in the breath in your body, but, your soul, also, shall stand to perish, right? For if you live after the flesh, again, not understanding what it means to worship God in the Spirit. If you're worshiping God in the Spirit, it's according to what's written. It's according to the oracles of God, the standard that he has left for us to guide our lives, within the heritage. The traditions, the things that we should do, the way that we should hold our head, the way that we should conduct ourselves, which is going to be different than what we've been taught. The thing that we feel naturally, inclined to, the thing that we naturally want to do. Is like we have to recondition, ourselves with respect to how we function, and how we move and get tied into what the Word of God is, that we can worship God in the Spirit. He says, for if you live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. So if we look at the words of this heritage and we use that to correct this body, like to denounce the things that we would normally do in the body, as he say, but if you live through the Spirit, right? If we use these words to correct the body, he says, live through the Spirit, do mortify the deeds of the body. It's like we kill the old man and the old things, that we used to do. And if we focus on these words, he says, ye shall live, right? Although we may expire as far as the breath in this body, but through the regenerative process, we have an opportunity to return until our Lord returns and makes it official across the board that that's now the standard, to where our bodies are celestial. And we are the gods, on this earth. As he said, is it not written in your law, that ye are gods and ye are the children of the Most High, talking to those of us within the heritage, talking to the children of Israel, okay? He says in 14, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, he says, they are the sons of God. So again, we have to distinguish, the things that we're doing in this world, which are separate and or different with respect to what this heritage is. This heritage is new to a number of us. Like, we have to get reacclimated, to this thing. It's hard, right? It's hard, but it's not hard from the standpoint of if you want this thing, then you make the adjustments necessary that you can have it, in your life. But this is how you become, the son or the sons of God. This is how you worship God in the Spirit. Anything else, you all, it's religion. It's according to the traditions of men, and it has nothing to do with what's written. 1 John 2 and 6, he says, he that say he abide in him ought himself also to walk even as he walked. And again, looking at the religion said only Christ could keep the law. It said nobody else, can keep the law. It's impossible. They say you can't do it. It just can't be done. So again, even with John 2:6, it's like, would they be setting us up for failure? Right? Like, I don't think so. They're letting us know that if you are the children of God, then this is what's required of you. But for those that are not of the children of God, it doesn't make sense, for them to attempt it. So they know that to be the case. So within their religion, they're like, look, we'll be fools trying to achieve this level. So within our religion, we're not making, that a standard. And we try to prevent people from even wanting to achieve it, right? Because once they do achieve it, then that's going to separate a difference, between us and them. And now it makes everybody else want to do it. And for all of us that can't do it, it's like we'll be seen, we'll be known. So they're playing a highly intellectual game with respect to, how they've devised, these religions and how they've used them to trap the minds of the people. But 1 John 2:6, he says, here, he that say he abide in him ought himself also to walk even as he walked. So even as Christ walked and he kept the law and he did no sin, is saying we got to do the same thing, right? We have to study this word, and although, within also within our flesh, and the challenges that we have, within that, we have the ability to repent. As he said, his grace, is sufficient. The key is that you're not using it as a crutch to, say, oh, well, I'm going to intentionally, do a particular thing, and then I'm just going to repent. I'm going to fall back. That's considered evil, right? But if you honestly make a mistake, in this walk and you recognize it, he said, don't beat yourself up. He said his grace, is sufficient. But our aim is to walk as he walked. He kept the law, right? They want to tell you the law is no more. See, there's too much conflicting with respect to what the religion has offered and what's actually written in this book according to those that have to stand and live by the heritage. God gave his people a heritage. He did not give his people a religion, right? Romans 8:4, it says that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So the righteousness of the law still has to be fulfilled, within us, right? Not walking after the flesh, meaning continuing, to live in sin, but after the Spirit, as we say, becoming familiar to what the oracles of God are. Understanding what Isaiah 8:20 is talking about when it speaks about the law, and the testimony, right? Diligently seeking these things out that we can use them to change our minds, to change our lives. As it said, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. It's right here in front of our face, y'all. We just got to do the work, Nobody can do the work, for you. You have to decide, to curtail certain things within your life that you can actually get into understanding, what these tenets or principles are, that you can add more and more to your life, that you can build yourself up. Otherwise, you're allowing yourself to be positioned to fail. And there's not going to be any excuse from that standpoint that you can provide. It's like you've given up. And you've just said, okay, well, I'm just going to live this life, and whatever happened, that's what happened. You've given up. But God is making it available for us to look at these words, to realize the challenges in our life, and to make the subtle changes. But first, in your mind, you have to decide that you want to make these changes. Right? John 14:6. Here you say, Jesus say unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man come unto the Father but by me. So I put this in because, again, we're talking about the heritage. And we're separating and we're making the difference, as to what that is, as opposed to, this religion that we're all familiar, with, right? Because in the religion, they tell you it's more than one way, that we can worship God. They tell you we have to be mindful of other people's, thoughts and beliefs and religions, and, they have a whole lot of stuff, going on. But if we're looking at what's written, Jesus said unto them, I am the way. So there's no other religion, right? There's no other heritage. If you're a part of this, then you're fortunate, right? You have a standout position that you have to perform, which is going to be different than all the other nationalities and all the other people, in the world. Now, some say, oh, that's a problem, now because you're looking at it like one people is going to be above another people. Well, historically, it's always been that way. And furthermore, if there's a God, then he is the highest point. And if he has chosen a particular people to do a different thing, what you mad about? This is God's perfect will. So if he wants one people to be over another people to rule in righteousness, what's the problem? right? The problem is men are evil. Men are wicked. Men want to supersede what God says, and they want to do what they want to do in a world that's not even theirs. This world belongs to the Creator. This world belongs to the Lord. This world belongs to our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this is what he says. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man come unto the Father but by me. So, if you're not of this heritage, you can't get to the Father. I don't care what the lying religion, say to you. I don't care how many other religions there are out there. They're all false religions. It's all idolatry. This is the way, the truth, and the life. That's it. There's nothing else. Everybody else is going to conform to this standard of righteousness being led by the children of God, the Israelites, within the kingdom of Israel. That's where we're going to see peace on earth. And guess what, y'all? People that look like you and I, those that are of the tribe of Judah, we're going to lead the way. John 15 and 16. Y'all heard me talk about this a couple of weeks ago. He says, you have not chosen me, he says, but I have chosen you. This is why I come back. In the religion, they want you to believe that you can choose God. You can choose Christ. They say all you have to do is confess with your mouth. Now, mind you, with the religion, they can create that standard for their belief. But it's in vain. It's not according to anything that is written. That's what makes the concept of the heritage totally different. And why we have to separate ourselves from it, as he said, come out of her, my people. Because within the heritage, he makes it clear. He says, you have not chosen me. He said, I chose you. So again, when you look at the Creator and the God being who he is, and you're looking at all the families, of the earth, and you got people talking about equality and, how we're supposed to, deal with each other. Well, God has written and it's expressed. We didn't choose God. God chose us. And for that reason, we're above all the other nations and or people that are on the earth. That's God's choice. So within the religion, they want you to believe well, first of all, in the religion, they took our book and they looked at what's expressed for us to do as the children of Israel, as we have sinned or we have lived this evil life, realizing that God have chosen us, that we didn't choose him, in order to be perfect and standing, under his grace, being cleansed in front of him. We have to confess with our mouth, our Lord. That Christ is the Savior. These are the instructions that he's put before the children of Israel that have strayed away. In the religion, they locked onto it, and now they're trying to say, oh, anybody can do it. All you have to do is confess with your mouth. But God said, you did not choose me. He said, I chose you. That's the difference again, with that religion and why it's so dangerous and how it's in vain. It's a religion that's not built upon anything but the imagination of men. The problem is they latched on to our book and they created something that mirrors and looks like, it's of the heritage, but under close scrutiny, it's different. It's not the same thing. And that's what we're pointing out, here today, myself and others. that the Most High has put this word, in their mouth and have opened their eyes that we can articulate and put the word out. As he said, my sheep going to hear my voice. Oh, it's like, we don't have to worry, about that. We just have to keep speaking it. And if your spirit bear witness, that's what you need. You don't need no DNA test from 23andMe or whatever else, they have out here. Your spirit has to bear witness. And then he said, oh, don't worry about the fakers. He said, because I'm going to shift them. But not a seed, of those that are mine are going to fall to the ground. Right? We don't have to worry, about those things. Right? But John 15:16, he says, ye have not chosen me, he says, but I have chosen you. Right? God chose the children of Israel. What you mad for? God said that we're going to lead the world. There's no equality, right there. But it's going to be done in righteousness. So don't worry. Right? He says, and ordained you. Right? Who is he talking about? In the heritage, he's talking about the children of Israel. He's talking within the 12 tribes. Judah at the front. That you should go and bring forth fruit. Okay? And that your fruit should remain. See, nobody else is going to be in control of this thing but the children of Israel. He says that whatsoever ye shall ask, of the Father in my name, he may give it, unto you. So I have to go back. I got to make this same reference, that I made before, because he says, ye have not chosen me, but, I have chosen you and ordained, you. And I say in the religion, they've twisted that to tell people all you have to do is now stand and confess with your mouth and, magically you're now a part of the covenant. You're a spiritual Jew, it's spiritual, Israel. But that then goes, to, the same word where Christ said they were going to come and they were going to say, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy, in your name? Didn't we cast out devils and didn't we do all these things? And he was going to say, I never knew you. Right? I never knew you because in 15:16 of John, he said, you didn't choose me. He said, I chose you. Because he didn't choose any of those people. So it don't matter what you do, in his name. You can't break your way in. He's not coming. He's not dealing with anyone other than those that he has chosen. You did not choose me, he said, but I've chosen you. And they would say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do, this? And he's going to say, I never knew you. He says, depart from me, you worker of iniquity, meaning you didn't have the law. Right? You're in transgression, of the law because you need to get in line. Right? And you're trying to supersede, that line by trying to break into the heritage. Right? Jeremiah 1:5. He says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Right? Which comes back to, he says, and ordained you in John 15, and 16. He said, I have chosen, you. In Jeremiah 1:5, it says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. So looking at the concept of the regeneration, process, or the fact that we can't choose him, but he chose, us. He was like, before I formed you in the belly, he was like, I knew you. This is how connected, this is, but we're here and we've forgotten. That's a part of the process, but we have to, be reinvigorated. We have to, wake up and we have to see it. He said, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou came forth out of the womb, I sanctified, thee, and ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Right? A prophet unto the nations, and speaking this point, recognizing there are two nations, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Right? Because it's split. This is where, it's a prophet to the nations, is all about. John 17:12, he says, while I was with them in the world, he said, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gave me, he says, I have kept, and none of them is lost. This goes back, again, I'm just saying, according to the heritage, right, according to this history of this people, of our ancestors. Remember, what the commandment said? It said, honor thy mother and thy father, and how we misunderstood, that to be broader than what it really is. We associated, that to our direct parents. But the honoring of our mothers and our fathers would be our ancestors, and the heritage and the customs and traditions, that they lived by. It said, honor thy mother and thy father, that thy days will be long, in the land. As long as we stick with our heritage, we're going to be fortunate. We're going to be blessed. But when we step off or away from our heritage, we're going to be oppressed, right? We're going to be cursed, right? But we must remember that the Creator chose us to be this particular people, to live in this world a certain way, and if we refuse to do that, then we suffer. So when we look outside our window and we turn on the news and we see all of these horrible things happening to us as we read this book, according to our heritage and history, as they say, if you don't know your history, then you're bound to repeat it, and that's why it's important for us to look at this thing and see these parallels, that we can stop repeating these atrocities, right? He says, while I was with them in the world, I kept them, in thy name. He said, those that thou gave me, he said, I kept them. None of them, are lost. He said, but the son of perdition. Right? So that goes, to say all Israel is not Israel. There are a number of those that, regardless as to this word going out, they're in love with the world. They're in love, with the illusion. So they're damned, right? These are the ones that it was already written that they were going to be, they were going to side with the enemy, or they were going to receive the reward of the wicked. He said that scripture might be fulfilled, because he said these things, were going to happen. It's just, don't allow yourself to be a part of the damned. Don't allow yourself to be blotted out of the book. You have to protect, this right here. Once you realize that you are Israel, you have to protect it. It's valuable. It's the most valuable thing that you have in this time dispensation right now, because that's what they're trying to keep from you and or take away from you once you get it. John 15:26, it says, but when the Comforter is come, whom I will send unto you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth, which proceed from the Father, he shall testify of me. He says, and ye also shall bear witness. This is what we're talking about. You have to bear witness. He says, because ye have been, with me from the beginning. Right? This can't be all the people in the world. This is a select group. Right? This is a particular situation right here. This is what makes the religion so flawed and or dangerous when you really start reading this book and it's talking about a heritage which deals with a particular people and how they've taken these writings and they created. Okay, when you talk about the Council of Nicaea, the Roman Church, the English, the Church of England, They created all of this stuff. But if you're of the heritage, he says, we were there with him at the beginning because we didn't choose him. He chose us. Matthew 19 and 28. And y'all, I know it's hard for a lot of people to like really grasp this because we've been lied to, all of our lives. We were born, into the lies. As we'll come to read, later, it's like we've inherited lies. They have inherited lies. Everything that we go by is off of a system of lies, right? Matthew 19 and 28, it says, and Jesus said unto them, verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration when the sons of men shall sit in the throne of his glory. He says, and ye shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So, you all have heard me read this one, before. And I'm just tying it into the point, of the heritage and how he says that we were there with him from the beginning, right? And then in Matthew 19 and 28, he talks about, okay, in the world they call it reincarnation, right? But according to our heritage, it's a regeneration, right? And he says we followed him, through this regeneration process, and it's going to come, to the point as we reach the climax that there are going to be 12 thrones, and the children of Israel are going to be sitting on these 12 thrones, right? That was the 144, right? The 144,000 as it talked about, and then it spoke about, the great multitude, right? As it said, sitting on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So you had the 144,000 that were going to be sitting, on these 12 thrones, and, it talked about, this great multitude that was going to be, in white with palms, in their hand, they were going to be judged, by the 144, right? That's the kingdom of Israel. And then the kingdom of Israel is set to then judge the entire world above all the nations, that are on the planet Earth, from that point, right? He says in 29, and everyone that have forsaken house or brother or sister or father or mother or wife or children or land for my name's sake. So while you're in this world, like when you wake up and you doggone realize, the trick. Think about the rich man, right? When he said, I've done, all the commandments. Christ said, well, take and sell, your possessions and give it to the poor. And at that point, he was like, oh, snap, I can't do that, right? So here, when we can forsake, these things, for our heritage, for Christ, then it's done within a perfect manner. But here he says, and everyone that have forsaken house, brother, sister, father, mother, wife, children, land, for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold, right? Like, do you understand that? Can you comprehend that, and can you receive that within faith to know that his word is true, right? He said, and shall inherit everlasting life. So not being so attached, to these things that are, of the trappings, of this world, but knowing how to reposition yourself within this word that you can achieve everlasting life. It's like not putting any of this stuff, above your heritage, but, repositioning your life, to where the order, is first understanding your heritage and then dealing with everything else and not allowing those things to put you at an infraction, against your heritage. He says, but many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Yeah, I touched on that. We did a whole discussion, about that. Okay. Psalms 1:19 and 11, he said, the testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever. I'm going to read that one again. Thy testimonies, talking about the prophecies, right, have I taken as an heritage forever. See, that's why I said to the law and to the testimony, y'all. We don't put enough emphasis on the prophecy to try and understand what it is that we can know where we are in this day and time, but that's a part of our heritage, not the religion, not the ways, of the world and, the CNN News, the Fox News, and NBC and ABC or whatever else they have out here for you. Our news should be tied to the testimonies, which is a part of our heritage. These prophecies, you get some folks that say, oh, there are all types of prophecies and this, that, and the other. Okay. Well, we have a specific set of prophecies that are tied specifically to us as a people and our heritage. So we need to focus in on that to understand why we're getting shot in the street, why we're robbed and why we're afraid, of each other, and why we're so evil, and just why things are so hectic, for us. And when do we come back to a point to where we can feel safe again? Because right now it ain't safe, out there. And it's not, God's fault as to why it's not safe, out there. It's us that have to come back to the understanding as to who we are and look at what God said, that we can then benefit from it and not think, oh, he's just going to put something in our lap because, we're a chosen people. As he said, except the son of perdition, right? There are those of us that when we see it, we're going to make the adjustment. You have others they just going to say to hell with it. They're going to keep riding out and being evil. That's the son of perdition. Those are the ones, their names are being blotted out of the book. Remember Titus, y'all, we talked about that. Titus, he hung in there for a long time and then he walked away, right? A son of perdition. He did a great work and then he walked away, right? His name is blotted out of the book, right? He says, thy testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever, right? For they are the rejoicing of my heart. We need to understand this prophecy. It will bring us joy to understand what we're going through right now. It's temporary. Ecclesiasticus 17 and 11, he says, besides this he gave them knowledge, right? So God gave us knowledge. A knowledge that he didn't give to everybody else, and we've abandoned, that knowledge to achieve the knowledge of the world, the knowledge of the religion, right? The knowledge of the wicked. Besides this, he gave them knowledge and the law of life for inheritance. He didn't give us Christianity, right? He gave us the law of life for inheritance. So we have to, as a people, come to understand what are these things that are associated to our heritage, to our way of life, to our history, to our name. 12 says, he made an everlasting covenant with them and showed them his judgments. Y'all, he didn't make an everlasting covenant with the heathens and with all the other nations. He says, you didn't choose me. He said, I chose you. He chose the children of Israel. He chose from Abraham the seed of Isaac, that being Jacob. That's not everybody, y'all. That's a specific seed and or group of individuals. That's the heritage. That's who the covenant is with. And it ain't no spiritual covenant associated to a spiritual Israel and there being spiritual Jews. All that stuff is made up. He made an everlasting covenant with them being the children of Israel, and showed them his judgment. That's it. Psalms 147, 19. He showed his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. That's the bound. That's the limits to what we're talking about. In the religion, they want you to feel or believe that this has now been opened because Christ came and Christ died. Well, now this is open to everybody. Those things were created within the system of the religion. It has nothing to do with the heritage and what God wrote for his people. That's a part of their history, which is associated to their name. The religion, or the men with Constantine and the Church of England and, the Roman Catholics, they created, all the things centered around, now, anybody can be of this heritage that God wants to specifically provide to the children of Israel. And you know what? We're going to call it Christianity. That's what we're going to call it, because we stood by in Antioch and we identified, those individuals, of the heritage. We're the ones who identified them as Christian. That's what we recognized them to be. We identified them as Christian. We didn't call them Israelites. Or Israel. We called them Christian. And from that, we can create our religion, and we're going to call it Christianity. And we're going to use some of their writings, to go along with what's saying, and then we're going to throw in some of our old customs and traditions, which these are the pagan, customs and traditions, such as today it's called Christmas. You got New Year's that's tied. I mean, all of this stuff is made up. It has nothing to do with what's written, based on, as I said, he showed his word unto Jacob. He didn't show it unto the other heathens. His statutes and judgments unto Israel. That's the limit, right there. He says, he have not dealt so with any nation. So in the religion where they're trying to act as if they have a hand in it, these writings say he didn't deal, with any nation. He says, as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. So when you talk about this corrupt religion and you see me coming down so hard on Christianity, it's because they don't have the judgments. They don't have the statutes. They don't have the knowledge. They have not known it. Praise ye the Lord. It's all made up. Okay? Let's look at Deuteronomy. Excuse me. Let's look at Deuteronomy 4 and 5. He says, behold, I have taught you, talking about the children of Israel. This is Moses right now at this point. Then they love to say, oh, that's the Old Testament, right? But you got to remember, when Paul and Christ, when Paul and Jesus, when they were here at that time, they were not teaching from something called a New Testament. They were still dealing with the book of the prophets and the books of Moses, right? So in the religion, they've separated these things and have tried to tell you, don't deal with the Old Testament. Well, y'all, these books or these writings are connected, to us. This is of our history. We don't throw our history away, right? This is our heritage. This, these are our writings. These are our ancestors talking to us from the past, right? Transcending time to the future, and it's still relevant. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whether ye go to possess it. Right? Look at this. He says, Keep therefore and do them. Have we kept them? No, we've abandoned it. We've abandoned our heritage. We've abandoned the words that he said that we should. He said, keep therefore and do them. Look at what he said. For this is your wisdom, right? So, for us, within our heritage, these writings, this is our wisdom. But we've abandoned this concept of wisdom for the wisdom of the world. For the wisdom of the way that they devised their religion out of the minds of men, the imagination, as the books say, of men. And that's why we're punished, right now. Because we can't look back into our history and come to understand it was said, keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. So before all the other people, this is what we're supposed to talk. This is how we're supposed to walk. This is how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. This is the range of foods that we should eat. This is how we dress. These are the things, that we look forward to do. It's like we have modest apparel. Our women don't wear pants, right? But the world, have ingrained, in our women that you can put on pants, and it's like, hey, no big deal. I put on pants today, no big deal, right? And that's just how trivial they've made us feel about our own heritage. But he said, this is your wisdom and the understanding and sight, of the nations. And, for us, as men, to understand what it means, to be modest, right? Not to not be whorish. And we feel like, oh, it's okay. It's like we have been spoiled, as the books say. We have been ruined by these people. We have stepped away from our wisdom to accept their wisdom, and it's leading us to be destroyed. And we're taking it lightly, right? But we do have, grace, and we do have mercy, but you have to recognize it, and you have to subtly make the changes. You can't, you can't know these things and just go against these things like, oh, well, okay, I'm just going to do it anyway. I know I'm not supposed to do it, but I'm just going to do it, anyway. Okay? Anyway, keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people, right? Once we come back to our heritage, we're on top of the world. We're now seen as a wise and understanding people. That goes back to the point of us knowing that we're great. We come from greatness, right? And we were kings, in the earth at one point in time. Not Africans, but, of Shem, Israelites. Right? And we were known, Solomon, one of the greatest or the greatest, king that has been recorded. Right? They came from afar, to listen, and or to meet with Solomon. Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. That's why it's important for us to walk away from the religion and to come back to the understanding of our heritage, that we can be seen as a great nation. It's called the Kingdom of Israel, right? We have nothing to do with the state, of Israel. That's totally separate. That's like the religion. Men created that. It has nothing to do with what's written, right? He says in number 7, for what nation is there so great? Right? There's no people that you can compare to the people that God has chosen. Now, other people, when hearing it, they have a problem, with it, but they're of the creation. They're not the creator, so, I don't know what to say. to them. But there's no apology for what God has already ordained, right? He says, for what nation is there so great? There's no nation greater than the kingdom of Israel, then the children of Israel, then Israel, then this heritage. It's the greatest thing on earth. But we've abandoned our heritage to accept, their wisdom, their religion, their way of life, their customs and traditions, the American dream. For what nation is there so great, who have God so nigh unto them? This is what I'm saying. None of the other people have God so nigh unto them. That's why their religions and their beliefs, it's irrelevant. The time is coming to where God will cast down all of those imaginations, and everyone will understand how to march according to the orders of the children of Israel in righteousness, and that's when we're going to see peace on earth, right? Who have God so nigh unto them as the Lord our God, right? As the Lord our God. Let's see. Look, I got that cut off. I'm gonna go back. Deuteronomy 6, Deuteronomy 4 and 7. Let's need to look at that. Deuteronomy. What was that? Number 7. Right? Okay. So yeah, it got cut off. It got cut off on my sheet right here. But number 7, it says, for what nation is there so great who have God so nigh unto them as the Lord our God is in all things that we can call upon him for. Right? This is why our heritage, is something to be cherished, because we have a direct connection to the Creator that no other people have. But we can't access that connection until we conform to the standards, the principles of our heritage. Right? This is our history. These are our ancestors. We're not slaves. Right? We're not, that's not our heritage, to remain in servitude. We are the rulers of this world. We just have to come back to our heritage, and we have to abandon the religions, because men created the religions. Psalms 127 and 3. He says, lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. So when you look at this, it's like our children, are supposed to continue this way of life, right? Coming out of the womb, it's like this is the reward. This is what we should look for, building our children up, that they can continue this great work. They can speak these words, and they can be seen, as to be wise, before all the nations and before all the other people. Right? Psalms 61 and 5. He says, For thou, O God, hast heard my vows. Thou hast given me the heritage of those that fear thy name. Right? The heritage of those that fear thy name, he's talking, or he's looking and he's saying, Lord, you chose me to be within the children of Israel. Like, wow, I'm thankful that I'm not a heathen, or of these other nations or any of these other people. Like, you've chosen me. Right? Oh God, For thou, O God, has heard my vows, right? Looking at the fact that God doesn't deal with any of these other people. He said, thou hast given me the heritage of those that fear thy name. Like, God don't deal with the other people. He's saying, but Lord, you chose me to be of that people, so hear my words, right? But God doesn't hear our words when we're outside the standard, of our heritage. And you got some folk that say, oh, I know God, hear my prayers. And again, they just don't understand the dynamic, realizing there is a devil out there, and God gave the devil a limited sense of power to do certain things. So your prayers are being heard, and met, but it's not being heard and met by who you think it's being heard and met by, right? Because when you serve the devil, he said, yeah, as long as you serve me, I'm going to give you, what you're asking for. But we have to distinguish this difference here to know that we're dealing with our Father. We're dealing with our Creator. It's according to our heritage. As he says, for thou, O God, has heard my vows. Distinguishing that difference. God has heard my vow, for thou hast given me the heritage. Nobody else has the heritage of those that fear thy name. God answers the prayers of the children of Israel. Right? Jeremiah 17:4, he says, and thou even thyself shalt discontinue from thy inheritance that I gave thee. So this is that thing where it's a problem for the Jewish people in the world today, because they want to tell you they've maintained all their records throughout all this time, But God says right here that, we would discontinue from our heritage, right? He says, and thou, even thyself, should discontinue from thy heritage. Now, you got to remember the regeneration process, because this is Jeremiah looking at when he comes back through the point of the regeneration, he's going to be discontinued, from his heritage, right? He says, and thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee. So when you have these people today, the Jewish people, claiming to have maintained the records, it goes against where the prophecy, and that's why this testimony is so key to this heritage, because we can look at it and we can look at what has transpired out here in the world to distinguish where the truth is and what's a lie. Right? Honor your mother and father that your days will be long, in the land. When we understand these things, we can then look out and we can see to where they're saying they've maintained all these records. God said you're going to discontinue from your heritage. So how? If they are the true people, how did they maintain it when God said it was going to be discontinued? Are they better and or greater than God? Did they figure out something, that God didn't? Right? Just telling you. Pay attention. All things are not according to what it appears. He says, and thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in a land which thou know not. If that doesn't apply to those who call black, African American, Negro, here we are discontinued from our heritage. We're in a strange land and we're serving. Right? He says, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemy. He told you the enemies was going to put the yokes of iron upon your necks. Those things happen. Those things that we can look at according to what's written and realize that happened to our people. Right? We're of the children of Israel, right? And within this prophecy, we can identify, as it pertains to the southern kingdom, man, that happened to Judah. Being the last kingdom standing, because the northern kingdom had already dispersed and had, already went, into all the other nations. It was the southern kingdom that was the last standing and or the last to fall. And this is why, the tribe of Judah were the ones being placed on, those cargo ships and, within the Atlantic slave trade. That was the distinguishable difference, right? He says, And I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. That happened, y'all. Okay? And as much as people would like to deny it and, say, well, that really doesn't have anything to do, with you, but we have been discontinued from our heritage. We lost, our name, and we're still in the land of our captivity serving our enemy, as God would identify, what's happening, these people, this situation. They're still considered, in the eyes of God, they're still considered to be the enemy, right? But here's the kicker as to why, we're in this land, we're serving our enemies. He says, for ye have kindled a fire in my anger which shall burn forever, right? Like, we pissed God off because we will not honor our mother and our father. We will not come back to our heritage. We will not look at the law of life that he gave us, for an heritage that we can be seen as a great people. We want to try and take the standards, of our enemies who want to be also our avengers. And we want to use, what they put before us in this world and say, oh, this is the knowledge, that we should live by according to this degree that I got from Stanford, I got from Harvard, I got from Princeton. And this is what we try to, set as a standard or system to success. But God said all these things are vain, right? Isaiah 28:15, he said, because ye have said, we have made a covenant with death. That's what I'm talking about. You get all these degrees and, you get all this knowledge and, Lord, don't let them give you a little bit of money. At that point, you're making a covenant with death, right? You're going to lose your soul and salvation for the trinkets, right? He says, and with hell are we at agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come near us. You all, a number of you have found safety and or a false sense of security with what this society has positioned itself to provide. But you're not realizing you've made a covenant with death, right? For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves. And this is the reckoning that the world is going to come to, is that in making this contract with death, right, they've made lies their refuge. Like all of this wisdom and knowledge and this money and all this stuff you think that you have that's going to prop you up, you're going to come to understand you've made lies your refuge. And under falsehood, that's how you're living your life. I know I have, and a number of people, when your eyes open, you realize, oh, shit, man, everything I've been taught is a lie. Everything. Do you know that shakes you to your core? And not everyone have yet to have that awakening, but for those of you that know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Romans 10:3. It says, for they being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, this is about the religion, right here. This is about the ways of the world. This is about their knowledge, which is different than God's knowledge, which is why I'm telling you knowledge is a vast concept. You need to identify what knowledge are you getting. Otherwise, you could be making lies your refuge, right? For they being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. More specifically, looking at the children of Israel, right, or those that are of the heritage, those that God has chosen, we have not submitted ourselves unto our heritage, which would be in line with the righteousness of God. So we have to reposition ourselves in order to know what the righteousness of God is. Otherwise, we're going about to establish our own righteousness. And that's what's happening in a big way within America, within society, within this world. People have established their own righteousness. And I'll use this name because we had talked about it earlier. It's like, Billy Carson. This man has built a fortune, off of establishing his own righteousness, off of being ignorant, of God's righteousness. And people buy in, to the deep concepts or, how he goes about to make it sound good. For they being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. Romans 1:22, number 1 and number 22, it says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. So when you look at people like, Billy Carson, T.D. Jakes, Geno Jennings, I know y'all love them, and all the rest of these folks, out here, professing themselves to be wise because they got their certificates or they have, their degrees from the seminary schools, right? They being ignorant of God's righteousness, have went about to establish their own righteousness and have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God, professing themselves to be wise in front of everyone, and the society and the world, the system, it props them up because they push the narrative, in which, this society wants them to keep the hypnosis going, keep the incantation, keep it alive. And those are the minions. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. But how can you tell them that they're fools? Because according to them, they got their certificates, they got their degrees, and they have excelled within, the wisdom of the institution. So to them, they're wise, and you're the fool because you don't have those things. But when you deal with the standard of your heritage and you're dealing with the righteousness of God and you're dealing with the law of life for the heritage, in all actuality, you're the wise one. They're the fools because the knowledge that they have is a knowledge that's of vanity, and or it's in vain. It's not of any real substance, right? Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into the image made like to corruptible man. That goes back to white Jesus and the statues, that you see over Brazil and, all throughout the world, within Christianity, that's the corruptible, image, right? And change the glory of the uncorruptible God, right? Because the uncorruptible God looks more like me, according to what's written, looks more like a black guy, a Negro, let me say it like that. According to what's written, he looks more like that, if anything, but he says, and change. See, they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God because in the book where it's written, he has hair of wool, he has dark skin, but they tell you, oh, don't worry about that. But they changed it and they made him, of light skin, white skin, straight blonde hair. They gave him blue eyes and, they changed it, right? And this is why if we don't know our history, we're bound to repeat it, right? This is why, you can profess yourself to be wise, but then you'll be a fool because if you're promoting the religion, you're dealing with those that have changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like, to corruptible man, right? He says, let me jump down to, let me finish reading now. Unto corruptible man, and to birds and to four-footed beasts and the creepy things. It's idolatry, y'all. All of these religions, I don't care which one, even Christianity, it's idolatry. Wherefore, God also gave them up to uncleanliness, right? Through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. It then just starts to go into different areas, because within the religion, I mean, even in Christianity, homosexuals, can have their own, church to Christ and Christianity. I mean, right? Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanliness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, right? Right? Number 25, it said, who changed the truth of God into a lie? Who did it? Right? The enemy did this. When man came and started creating all these religions, I don't care which one, you're associated with. If you're not dealing with the heritage that's based on the law of life as it is written, he says, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever? Amen. I know it's hard for a lot of people to see how you're serving the creature, because in the religion, you're serving man. All the money and everything you provide and give, that's to their lifestyle. That's to keep them rich and to keep them going. You're serving the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. He says, for this cause, God gave them up unto vile affections. This is why. They profess themselves, they profess themselves, to be wise. Right? But they have become, fools. As he say in 26. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. For even their own women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. Right? That speaks to lesbianism. Right? He says, and likewise also the men leaving the natural use of the woman. I mean, okay, that's two men, trying to be together. In the world and in the religion, they say these things are okay. And you have folks that say, oh, you have to be tolerable, to these things. But God says, according to our heritage, these things are abominable. These things are vile affections. These things are not according to what is written based on correct knowledge. But if you're looking at the knowledge of the world, if you're looking at the knowledge of the devil, then these things are okay. And this is why there's a difference between the religion and how men have created it and what God has written according to the law of life for heritage and the people that he chose, and how we're supposed to abstain from these things, that we can be seen as a wise and great nation. And for this cause, 27. And likewise also the men leaving the natural use of the woman, said, burned in their lust one towards another. Right? Men with men, working that which is unseemly. But they'll tell you in the world, hey, it's okay, transgender, it's like, it's all right. But God said these things are unseemly, right? And receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was met. God says it's in error. But depending on who you talk to in the world, they say you got to tolerate it. They say it's okay. And that's why the religion, is dangerous. And that's why we have to understand in this world, there's a knowledge that comes from the devil, and then there's a knowledge that comes from God. God's knowledge is tied to what's written according to the heritage and the particular people that he set out to do his will. Not everybody can do, the will of God. Right? In 28, he says, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, like they don't want to deal with this law of life. They got something else. They're going about to establish their own righteousness, their own religion. Right? God gave them over to a reprobate mind. So if you're dealing in religion, including Christianity, you have a reprobate mind to do things which are not convenient. And that's just the rawness, of it. But the truth will make you free. The truth will make you free. That's what we have to deal with, and that's why it's important for us to acknowledge, our heritage. Second Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians 2 and number 4. Who oppose and exalt himself above all that is called God. So here in this day, in this time, it's saying who have opposed and exalt himself above all that is called God. You have a particular people, that have done that. I mean, they're in control, of the world right now, right? They've opposed and exalt himself above all that is called God. And in fact, they created an image, that looks more like them and told everybody this is God. And a lot of people bow down and that's what they worship, and, that's what they see these groups of people as. They see them, as God. Who oppose and exalt himself above all that is called God, right? Because all that is called, God, and those that have positioned themselves to be God are two different things, because that is called, God, that's tied within the heritage, as he said, is it not written in your law that ye are gods, right? That you are the children of the Most High God, right? Or that is worship. So that he as God sit in the temple of God, showing, himself that he is God, right? This is where you have within their religions, they've positioned themselves to be the authority, as the Pope, is walking around as the representation of, of God on earth. Man, all this stuff is right here. It's in our face. Blatantly, in our face. And that's how you distinguish the difference between the religion and actually what's written as it pertains to the heritage and what's tied to the history of the people. Romans 3:11, it says, there is none that understand. There is none that seek after God. They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that do good, no, not one. Right? And that was our position. Like, we were born into the belly of the beast. Nobody knew the truth. Right? By the grace of God, a number of us, our eyes were open, and some of us, our eyes are beginning, to open. But we were born into the lies. Man, it's hard to get that stuff out when, as a child, you come through and they just start inundating you, with these traditions and these customs and this refuge of lies, right? But it's all unprofitable, It says their throat is an open sepulchre. With their tongues, they have used deceit. So it's like in this society, all we do is speak lies. Because we're not dealing with the knowledge of God. As he said, they being ignorant of God have gone about, to establish their own righteousness. They've gone about to establish their own way of living. They don't go by the law of life or the heritage. They've created their own law that they're going by. Right? It says, the poison of asp is under their lips. Right? These words, this way of life, it's not going to benefit. It's not going to profit us. We have to come out of her, he said. Come out of her, my people. The question is, are you his people? He said, whose mouth is full of cussing and bitterness. Now, y'all know I got to get on that cussing because it's not talking about what you consider cussing, right? It's speaking, more from the standpoint of aligning your way of life that speaks against the oracles, of God. He said their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways. These are the things we see, as we look into the world. These are the things we see as we look into the world. Destruction and misery, are their ways. And until we come back to the state of our heritage or the standards of our heritage, that's what we're going to see. He said, and the way of peace, they have not known them. This is what I'm telling you. It don't matter how much they promise you that they're looking to bring the world, into a world of peace. They will never be able to do it. They have not known it. They don't deal with the law of life or inheritance. So the concept of peace, they're dealing with lies. They've made lies their refuge. They've made a covenant, with death. Right? And the ways of peace, they have not known them. There is no fear of God before their eyes. As he said, they are ignorant, of God and have gone about to establish their own righteousness. There's no respect for God before their eyes. 2 Thessalonians 2 and number 7, it says, for the mystery of iniquity already do work. It's like sin is everywhere. Right? Only he who have let it will let until he be taken out of the way. It's like sin is everywhere. And you're going to live that life of sin until you die. Right? Or you change your way. Right? It do already work. Only he who let it, only he who do it, will do it until, he be taken out of the way. Like sin is going to exist until God come and rid the world, of sin. And hopefully you're not on that side to receive the reward of the wicked. He says, and then shall the wicked be revealed, right? As he's moving you out of the way, that's when the wicked is going to be revealed, because there are those that he's going to mark to be saved or pulled, up out of the calamity, as it is written. He says, and then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, y'all, with all power and signs and lying wonders. These are the things that we have to train our eyes to see, the difference in the games that they play. Because the devil, he's full of tricks, right? And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, right? So when we're not dealing with the scope of our heritage, we're going to be inclined to see the workings of Satan with power and signs and lying wonders. We won't be able to identify the difference. You're going to see something and you're going to think, oh, this is of God. But no, it's just the games the devil plays. He says, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth. The love of the truth is tied to the heritage, not the religion. The love of the truth is within this testimony. The love of the truth is within this law of life that he gave us for the heritage. Right? He says, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. So those that might be saved, he's talking about the children of Israel that had an opportunity to come out of the world, but they were so, inundated. They were so in love, with the world that they couldn't let it go. So, the mystery of iniquity do work in those that will let it work until he move it out the way. They could not be saved. So they had to be destroyed. He says, and for this cause God shall send them strong delusion. So you got folks in this world today that they're under the strong delusion of the religion. They're under the strong delusion, of this society. They can't see, anything else. They can't unlearn to learn. And for this cause, they have their degrees and their certificates, and, they have their eyes set on how much money, they're about to make. He says, and for this cause, God shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie. He says, they that all might be damned who believe not the truth. See, the truth, there's only one truth. And that truth is associated to this heritage. That truth, as Christ said, I am the way. Right? He says, I am the truth. He says, I am the life. There's only one truth. And it's tied to this heritage because God said, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And in choosing us, we are to deliver the truth into the world. Nobody else, is positioned to do it. A lot of people have an issue, with it, and they, again, latched on to this book, but they're dealing, as a minister, of Satan, because they don't have the truth. They have went about to establish their own righteousness, making men serve them. You have men serving men. Right? He says, and God shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. It's like you love this world and everything that it provides for you. It's like you find pleasure in this unrighteousness. John 5:15 and 9, it says, For as the Father have loved me, so have I loved you. He says, continue you in my love. So, love, right? In the world, in the religion, love can be anything, man. I mean, it's centered around a feeling, right? How you make me feel. That's how we've come, to measure love. And it's just that ambiguous, It's just a word that people use, to entrance one another, right? But when we look at it from the standpoint of the heritage, it's a word that has substance. And you can measure it according to what's written. He says, as the Father have loved me, so have I loved you. He says, continue in my love. How do we continue in his love? Right? He says, if you keep my commandments, you shall abide in my love. So this is how we measure love, not based on the feeling, oh, you make me feel this way, feel that way, oh, I love you. Right? Love is measured according to how we deal with this heritage, and we treat each other according to the commandment as the moral law, the civil law. If you love me, he said, keep my commandments. Right? He says, if you keep my commandments, you shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. See, these are the levels, to this thing where you got folks talking about the Father and Yahweh and like they're dealing with Yahweh. No. We have to deal with the Son because that's our head. We have to prove ourselves to the Son, who is the Creator, who is our Creator. Right? This is the power that was given to him by the Father. I know that's hard for a lot of people, to understand because we've been turned and twisted, all types of ways within a misunderstanding. Right? He says, these things I have spoken unto you that my joy might remain in you and that your joy might be full. He said, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So, that you love one another as I have loved you. Again, we have to analyze the commandments to understand how we're supposed to treat each other, how we're supposed to love, one another. Otherwise, we're going about to establish our own righteousness, and we're making it up in our head as to how we're going to do it. And at that point, we're ignorant to the way of God when he prescribed it. He wrote this thing out, as he said, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. Right? These words are the words that are going to clean, us or cleanse us. So we have to look at what he wrote to understand how we love or should love one another. Okay? He says, John 14 and 15, he said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Just dealing with the point of what love is and how it's associated, to the heritage. And it's tied, to the commandments, how we're supposed to love, our brother or treat someone as you want to be, treated. We don't make it up in our head. We examine the commandments and see how, it's expressed that we're supposed to treat each other based on the moral code, and based on the civil code. Right? 1 John 2:3. He says, and hereby we do know that we know him. So you can say you have a relationship with God all you want, and you got a personal relationship, and God this and God. You can make up and say whatever you want to say that makes you feel good, but know that you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable until you actually repent. Right? And you come back to God and you say, I screwed up. Right? But he says, and hereby we do know that we know him if we keep his commandments. So if you're not keeping his commandments, it's foolish for you to say that you have a relationship with God. Then you'd have to want to know, well, what kind of relationship you got if you're not keeping the commandments? And that's one of the commandments that he put out there. He said, if you want to abide in my love, he said, keep the commandments. Right? He said, he that say I know him and keep not his commandments, he said, is a liar. So you have a lot of people, they're liars. And if you were to outright say you're a liar, they would get offended. Right? But in observation, you can look and see if they're not keeping the commandments and they're saying they know God, then if you're tied to this heritage, you're able to quickly assess, oh, they're a liar, or they're lying, or they have no clue as to what they're talking, about. You can soften it up however you want to soften it up, but in the end, the book says, and keep not his commandment is a liar, and the truth is not in it. So this kind of correlates with Isaiah 8:20, where he says, to the law and to the testimony. He said if they didn't know, those things, he said there was no light, in them, right? He said, but whosoever keep his word, coming back to his word, what is, his word? Because this same word is the word that's going to clean you. This is the same word that's going to convert your soul, right? This is the same word that brings you to the point of salvation that you can be saved, right? When everyone else, that is dealing with iniquity, they're going to perish, receiving the reward of the wicked. He said, but whoso keep his word, he said, in him verily is the love of God perfected. So when you keep the commandments, when you keep his word, that's when you become perfect. That's when it's perfected. That's when we're not considered with spot, blemish or wrinkle. And we then can be considered worthy, to be saved in the time of calamity that we do not receive the reward of the wicked. He said, hereby know we that we are in him. That's how you know that you're with God. That's how you know that you're with the Creator. When you're in the heritage, right, and you're keeping his word and you're understanding the commandment. That's what we're supposed to do. That's how we distinguish ourselves to be different from everybody else. He that say he abide in him ought himself also to walk, even as he walked. He said, brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment. Right? You got some folk that trying to say Christ got something new, But he said, brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment which ye had from the beginning. All of this stuff, nothing changed, because they want you to think, from now to then, there's something different within God. There's something has changed, and you can't live, from the old laws. I mean, the old laws, there's no way you can do it. Well, morality is morality, okay? The standard in which we treat each other from a civil standpoint, these principles and things, those things can transcend, time. But we don't have a temple right now, y'all, so we don't have to worry about the temple laws. We don't deal with animal sacrifice, so we don't have to do that. So what are these people talking about when they say, these laws are antiquated or so old? How do you bring them into modern times, right? You bring them into modern time because it's a law that's centered around morality. It's a law that's centered around the civil standpoint that say, oh, if we injure a person this way, then this is how we repay them, or if we damage, their property in that way, then this is the recompense, for that. These things are too simple, but they've went about to complicate it and make you think something has changed. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is that, the opposition and or the devil is in the forefront leading the world in wickedness, within unrighteousness, going about to establish their own righteousness within the venues of religion, education, politics, and economics. Okay? He says, brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but an old commandment which ye had from the beginning. He said, the old commandment is the word which ye have heard from the beginning. All of this stuff is circular. It's a chain. It's all connected, right? We're just different people, different faces, at this point. But the spirit of the word is the same. And as we regenerate and come back and we deal with this, we're supposed to lock into this heritage. It does not change. It didn't change. The only thing that has changed are the lies within the religion. The only thing that has changed is a new religion, is on board that may not have been, in position or place at one time or another. But this heritage, it's always been there and it's always going to be here. Once God presented, this as the heritage for this people, it stood forever. It does not change, y'all. 1 John 5:1, whosoever believe in Jesus, whosoever believe that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, right? If you believe, in the Son as being the Lord, you're born of God. And everyone that loved him, that begot, love him also that is begotten of him. By this, we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments, all tied to the heritage. If you step away from the heritage, there's no way that you can love God. If you step away from the heritage, there's no way that you're connected, with God. You may be tied to a society. You may be tied, to religious concepts and beliefs, but those things have nothing to do with the true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Shem. Okay? He said, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous, because you got folks that are saying, how can you do it? It can't be done. And it was of old time, and now this time. No. His commandments are his commandments, right? And they're not grievous. They don't change. He says in number 4, but whatsoever is born, of God overcome the world, right? When you realize that you're of this heritage, you're going to overcome the strappings of the flesh. You're going to mentally overcome this world. He says, and this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. It's tied to the heritage. If you want the victory, you got to come back to the standards of the heritage. You need to learn this history from the point of how God wrote it as it applies to the children of Israel. That's going to give you the strength to overcome the bound of this world. The things that have your mind tied, into the fallacy of this world. Because you're using, as he said, this word. You're understanding how to worship God in the spirit, at that point. That you're using the word of God to free your mind. He says, he says, who, in number 5, who is he that overcome the world? Who? Who is he that overcome the world? But he that believed that Jesus is the Son of God. So you're going to overcome the world when you understand this heritage that, God was going to send his son, and his son was going to redeem, his people. And this is how he's going to do it as it's laid out, in the prophecy. That's when you're going to overcome, the world. And that's when you're going to position yourself, to be within salvation, right? That when the Lord comes and he strikes the world with his wrath, that you'll be pulled aside and kept safe. He says, for this is he that came by water and blood, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. Again, just expressing he was born like, any other man, was born. The Immaculate Conception, that's another trick, of the religion. For those that have gone about to establish their own, righteousness. That's a creation, of man, right? He says, and it is the Spirit that bear witness, because the Spirit is truth. And this is what I'm telling you. You don't need DNA with this, because we've all gone through this regeneration, process, or this regenerative, process. Now it's about, do your spirit bear witness? Because in that spirit, you're able to identify with the truth. Again, understanding the words, understanding the connection to the heritage, how you're supposed to live your life as God has made it available to you and or to us to be different than all these other people. Romans 8:16, he say, the Spirit itself bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. That's all we're talking about. If your spirit don't bear witness to this, then your spirit don't bear witness. But if you've known or felt like, something is wrong, right, and you just couldn't put your finger on it, well, we're telling you, come back to the heritage. Examine the heritage. Look at your name. We were stripped of our heritage, our history, and our name. Within these writings, we can find those things. We can see who our ancestors are. It says, the Spirit itself bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. There's a particular group of people that are the children of God. Not everybody can be the children of God. And I don't care what, the lies of the religion, would like to tell you as it purports a spiritual, Israel. The children of God are the children of God, as he said, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And it's according to the seed, right? 2 Corinthians 11:22. He says, are they Hebrews? He says, so am I. Are they Israelites? He says, so am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? He says, so am I. Again, here's Paul, distinguishing, himself or making this comparison as to who are the Israelites, who, are the ones, of this heritage. So, excuse me. So I'm using it, to draw this difference, or I'm using it to draw a wedge, let me say that, between the religion, that's out there and what this heritage, is truly all about, who we are, right? Because they kind of want you, to believe that the concept of an Israelite is broad, and, that Paul, in dealing with the Gentiles, he was talking to, the other nations and all these other people. But look, he said, are they Hebrews? So am I, right? Are they Israelites? He said, so am I. Are they, the seed of Abraham? He said, so am I. So even when you look at all these people that Paul was talking about, he said, they're Hebrews, they're Israelites, they're of the seed of Abraham. He said, so am I. But the difference, Paul being of the seed, he was of the tribe of Benjamin. That's the connection. So in all of the saying, and so am I, he's saying, when he's talking about these people and these Gentiles, they're all the children of Israel. Romans 9:9. He says, for this is the word of promise. Again, just looking at how Paul was dealing with it, because the lies of the religion want you to think, he's communicating, outside the scope of his heritage. But I want to show you how he just got finished examining the Hebrews, the Israelites, and the seed of Abraham, how even he is that, right? In Romans 9:9, it said, for this is the word of the promise. He said, at this time will I come, and Sarah will have a son. So now the focus, based on the promise, is according to the son that Sarah had. Because remember, in 2 Corinthians 11:22, he said, are they the seed of Abraham? He said, so am I. And he was a Benjamite. He was, of the tribe of Benjamin. So in Romans 9, the promise, right, is looking at Sarah is going to have a son. Sarah had Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. And from Jacob, the 12 tribes came. That's the connection that Paul and this heritage is dealing with, and what everyone is talking about in these writings. The promise. The promise is not to all the other nationalities and or people, as Paul is saying, are they Hebrews? Are they Israelites? Are they the seed, of Abraham? So am I. It's according to the promise. He says, at this time will I come, and Sarah will have a son. That was Isaac. So through Isaac is the seed that the promise, would be associated. So when Paul is dealing, even at that time, looking at the Gentiles and all of them that were lost, it was according to this promise, right? Romans 10:1, he says, brethren, my heart desire and prayer, to God for Israel is that they might be saved, right? So Paul knew, what he was doing. It's the religion that has distorted, the word and tricked the minds of the people to think, that something else is being said. And that's why we have to come back according to the heritage. And we have to plant, ourselves within this heritage, that we can grow with that understanding and be different and separate from what the world has positioned. That's why you've heard me say the world is the cult, because it's functioning outside of the principles and or the will of God. It has nothing to do, with this heritage. Jump down to number 11, Romans 10:11. It says, for the scripture's sake, whosoever believe on him shall not be ashamed. So we just got finished looking at how the word talks about the promise is based on Sarah, having a son. Paul is talking about the Hebrew, the Israelite, and, the seed of Abraham, identifying that, he is an Israelite, of Benjamin, right? So when it says, whosoever believe on him should not be ashamed, again, this is about the promise. And as it pertains to the son that Sarah was going to have. Because Abraham, outside of Isaac, he had 7 other sons, right? And Ishmael was one of those sons who's the father, of the Arabs and this Muslim, religion. And I'm just going to say religion, it don't matter which one it is, religion was all created, by man, and the hand of the devil is all throughout, the world. So yes, even within that, religion, it's unsettling. But the Arabs with Ishmael, even they have a heritage, to follow, not a religion, right? Okay, so he said, for whosoever should call, he said, whosoever believe on him shall not be ashamed. This is centered around the heritage according to the promise. Sarah was going to have a son, Isaac, then Jacob, then it comes down to the 12 tribes, seeing that Paul, is of the tribe, of Benjamin. He was associated with the southern kingdom, so this is what we're talking about. Whosoever believe on him shall not be ashamed. He said there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Right. So I pull this again because there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, because we have to go back to 2 Corinthians 11:22. He said, are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? He said, so am I. So when you look at him saying there's no difference between, the Jew and the Greek, you've heard me say before, this Greek is looking at the children of Israel that were in captivity, to the Greek for the hundreds of years that they were in captivity, and generations were born into identifying as Greek, but yet they were of the promise, right? He says, for the same Lord is over all. He said, for the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. So we were scattered into all the different nations. So right here where Paul is saying there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, he's identifying, to the fact that there were Israelites that had grown up under the Greek fashion. Like we've grown up under the American, fashion. And to this point, although we're of Judah, right, and we're in America, and, you have our people spread abroad that we're not calling ourselves, Israel or Israelites. It comes to this point, there's no difference between whether we're calling ourselves American, whether we're calling ourselves Nigerian, Puerto Rican, whatever it is that we're calling ourselves. If we are of the promise, if we are of the seed, if your spirit is bearing witness that we are the children of God, he said, there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek. He said, for the same Lord over all is rich unto all that call upon him. You just got to call upon him, right? He said, for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And right there, the religion says, see, this is everybody. But again, this is looking at how scattered abroad that we have been. And now we're coming back together, right? For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Sarah was having the son. That's what was tied to the promise. This is the heritage because God gave Jacob the name Israel. And with that, he gave, the law of life for the heritage. That's the whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved, as it pertains to the promise coming from Isaac to Jacob to the 12 tribes. The religion wants you to think that now it's open to any and everybody. That's the difference between, the lies of the religion and the law of life, where we're dealing with the truth. Right? Romans 9 and 7, it said, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. And this is what we're talking about. Because Abraham had several other sons. He had 7 other sons outside, of Isaac. Right? He says, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. He said, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. This is what we were just looking at when it spoke about the promise in Sarah, to have a child. That's Isaac. Everything is condensed according to this heritage, starting with Isaac. That's why I said the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Shem. Right? That's why it said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That's who the promise is associated with. So when it says, whosoever shall call, it's based on the lineage of Isaac and Jacob, the children of Israel, according to this heritage. Revelations 14 and 12. It said, here is the patience of the saints. See, the saints can only be of the seed from Abraham, Isaac to Jacob. That's the only way that you can be a saint. But in the religion, anybody can be a saint. Right? But according to the heritage, you must be of the seed, because within the seed, this is where the promise is. Right? He said, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. First of all, you can't keep the commandments of God unless you're a part of the heritage. That's just it, because he did not give, his statutes or his judgments to any other people. It was given to Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. This heritage, y'all, is something. Something to be cherished. Something to be protected. Right? Here's the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. As he said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Romans 9:8, he says, that is, they which are the children of the flesh. He said, these are not the children of God. Because remember, we just got finished reading in 9:7, it said, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children. Right? So we're now looking, he says, that is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God. So if you're not of the promise, coming through the seed of Isaac, although you may be of Abraham, but if you're not, coming through the seed of Isaac and Jacob, he says, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God. So if you're not of the promise according to the seed of Isaac and Jacob, you're not the children of God. That's just what it is. Again, the religion wants it to be different, right? But that's why we're distinguishing here what the heritage says and how we must stand on the heritage in truth, or be misled, in the religion to receive the reward, of the wicked. Right? He says, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God. But the children of the promise, remember, the promise was tied to Sarah, and she was going to have a son, which was Isaac. He said, but the children of the promise accounted for the seed. And that seed was Isaac, Jacob, right? The children of Israel. That's whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. according to the promise, according to the seed, and that's according to the heritage, not the religion. Revelations 12 and number 17. Revelations 12 and number 17. He says, and the dragon was wroth, with the woman. I'm just kind of now going, into where we talked about this seed. So now I'm going to deal, with a little bit of this prophecy in Revelations, where it talks about the attack, that comes upon the children of Israel, for being the children of Israel, right? And how the rest of the nations are just mad. They're angry, that God chose the children of Israel and didn't choose them, right? So here, and the dragon was wroth, with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, right? That seed, still looking at how the promise is tied, to Isaac and Jacob. That the remnant of the seed, which keep the commandments of God. See, this is how it's talking about the children of Israel, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Everybody don't have that. According to the heritage, it was given from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, then coming down to the 12 tribes, right? That's who the dragon is mad with, right? And sets out to make war, with those that keep the commandments of God. That, those that have this heritage, they have set their sights on the saints. Romans 3:1, it says, what advantage then have the Jew? Because they love to talk about this. It don't make no difference, whether you're a Jew, this, that, or the other, but y'all, it does make a difference. For us to be of the southern kingdom, for us to be of the tribe of Judah, it does make a difference, because the prophecy said we have to be raised up first, and we're going to lead this thing, right? So what advantage then have the Jew? Or what profit is there, of the circumcision? He says, much every way, chiefly because unto them were committed the oracles of God. So within Judah, the oracles of God are committed because the lawgiver is coming out of Judah, right? So it's a big thing that, here we are still in the land of our captivity, not knowing, who we are. But we're reorganizing, some of us, we're reorganizing, ourselves, and we're putting the call out, that we can be in formation, to stand and deal, as the prophecy say, that we must be raised up first. Judah has to be raised up first, right? And there's a great benefit, to being, Judah, right? That we get to usher in, the law, that we get to stand with the children of God, that it says, much every way, because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. 1 Peter 4:9, he says, use hospitality, right, one to another without grudging. He says, as every man have received the gift, even so minister the same one to another, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God, right? So again, when he said, do unto others as you would have others, do unto you, right here, use hospitality, with one another without grudging, and then he says, as every man have received the gift, like, be aware, of what your gift is and function, minister, serve, according, to your gift as a steward, and you do it, in the manifold, within the grace of God. Then he says, if any man speak, let him speak the oracles of God. This is what we're supposed to hold on to, as the children of Israel, dealing with this heritage, right? We don't do like the ministers of the religion sitting up and giving you the prosperity speak or, the great motivational, speak. No, he said we're supposed to talk to you about these oracles of God. We're supposed to talk to you about the law. We're supposed to talk to you about the morality, the civility. We're supposed to speak to you about, our diet. We're supposed to look at our customs and our traditions, the things that set us apart, right? He says, if any man's minister, let him do it as the ability which God gives, that God in all things may be glorified. See, God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ. So right there you get folks saying, you praying to Jesus. You praying to Jesus, and you should be praying to the Father. No, we're not praying. I do not pray to Jesus. I do not pray to Yahshua. I do not pray to the Son of God. But I do understand that all things have to be glorified through the Son, because the Son has to vouch for me. I have to first please the Son. He has to look and say, you're worthy. Now I'm going to take you, to the Father. That God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom, right, be praise and dominion forever and ever, because the Father gave dominion to the Son forever and ever. Amen? Amen. Right? John 4:22, he said, ye worship, ye know not what. Talking about the religion, they have no idea, what they worship. He said, we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Looking at this heritage that we're dealing with, if you want salvation, it's going to come from Judah. That's why it says in the writings, right, the tribe of Judah has to be raised up first, because salvation is going to come through Judah. That's why in America and across the world they spend billions of dollars to make sure we don't wake up. They do all they can to keep us asleep, and they give, a few of the ball players and the entertainers, and, they put different people in political position and status, to make certain that we stay asleep. Right? He says salvation, for salvation is of the Jews. Look at Luke 1:68. He said, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, y'all. This is our heritage. And we're talking today about the difference between the religion and the heritage. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel. That's as far as it goes. There's no such thing as a spiritual Jew or a spiritual Israel. All that stuff is made up within the religion, right? I don't care what religion you go to. There's a founder, okay, and there's a date in which he created whatever that religion is. When you look at this heritage, it's written that God gave it to Jacob. That's how we authenticate it. And that's why we deal with what's written. That's why we reject the religion and we embrace our heritage, because God gave us something he did not give to any other people, and they pissed off, they mad about it. Okay? Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people. All of that, it's locked into the heritage. He's not visiting and redeeming nobody but his people. So all the lies that the religion have told and said, you just got to confess it, with your mouth. You have inherited lies. Right? He hath visited and redeemed his people, and have raised up a horn of salvation for us being the children of Israel, in the house of David his servant. That's why I said, for salvation is of the Jews. Right? He said, and spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began. Y'all, like I said, None of this has changed. They want you to think something has changed over time. Nothing has changed. We're just reaching the climax, to where the fulfilling of the Gentiles is about to come, into place, and the strong arm of the Lord our God is going to move us into the chief position, according to what's written based on the heritage, right? Matthew 1:21, he says, and we're coming down to the end. Matthew 1:21, he says, and she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, and he shall save his people from their sins. All talking about the children of Israel, all associated with the heritage. Romans 3:3, he says, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? Right? It said, God forbid. So it don't matter that within the religion they can't hear or understand what's happening within the heritage. Or some folks say, oh, you all are doing that heritage stuff. Y'all in a cult. It doesn't matter what they say. For what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? We're talking about the faith of God, y'all. We're not talking about the traditions of men. We're not talking about the customs that they brought forth in this world, right? Looking at all the religions were made by man. You can read where God gave this thing to a people. He gave it to Jacob, right? God forbid. He said, let God be true and every man a liar. So it's like, let what we're reading as it pertains to this heritage be true, and all the religions and all the stuff in the world based on their institutions and their society is like, let God be true and every man a liar, as it is written, right? That thou may be justified in thy sayings, right? So we're going to be justified as long as we stick to this heritage and the oracles of God. But the moment we start to lean on the wisdom of the world and the sayings and their philosophy, at that point, we can't be justified, right? He said that thou may be justified, in thy sayings, and might overcome when thou art judged. See, we'll overcome if we stick to the oracles of God, if we lay within our heritage. We will overcome when we are judged. But if we deal with the understandings within the wisdom of men and how they've designed this world, and we accept, the lies as our refuge, we will not overcome, when we are judged. We will receive the reward of the wicked. Right? And our last verse, for today, as we look at John 18:37. Because Pilate, right? It said, Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? Jesus answered, thou sayest that I am a king. He said, to this end was I born. Right? And for this cause I came, into the world. So here, Christ is explaining, like, I'm not coming, right now, to reestablish the kingdom of Israel. I'm coming now, that I could be sacrificed or killed, that I can redeem my people, right? He says, to this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world. All of this is according to the prophecy, y'all, aligned with the heritage as to what would happen within the rise and the fall and the rise, of the children of Israel. Right? For this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Bearing witness unto the truth, meaning speaking to the law, speaking, to the prophecy as to what's written, as to what is said, must happen in order for the children of Israel to be rectified and to come into position to where they can rule the world in peace and in righteousness, right? He said that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth, he says, hear my voice. And it's just that simple. Everyone that is of the truth, he said, hear my voice. What is his voice? It's this word. So if they're not speaking according to the oracles of God, it's not his voice. If they veer off and they start, getting away from the point of the heritage, it's not his voice. When they're giving us the economics and the political, landscape and the religious, ideology, it's not his voice. Those things are not associated to the promise. He said he came to bear witness unto the truth. That's looking at the oracles of God. That's looking at what has been written. He says, everyone that is of the truth, hear my voice. He said his sheep would hear his voice. Everyone that is of the truth, hear my voice. With that, I say shalom, Israel.